you really want to stop drinking, if you want to quit alcohol for good, this video is the ultimate guide. Now, I'm not going to give you steps that you can take because steps insinuate you're either going up or down. I believe that sobriety and the journey of quitting alcohol for good is actually a series of small changes, I like to call them pivots, that you can do over time that will eventually not only help you quit alcohol and stay sober for good, but could possibly erase the desire to drink forever. So if you want to know more about that, please don't go anywhere, because this video is going to show you how to do it all. Welcome to the Sober Web, my friend. If you don't know me already, I'm Clark. I am a recovered alcoholic who battled alcoholism for 13 years, and I was able to not only quit alcohol for good, but I was able to erase my desire to drink and beat my alcoholism because of a lot of the things that I talk about and I share in this ultimate sobriety guide. And I really hope that you watch all of it, because at the very, very end, I have a free digital gift for you. But now let's get into the first pivot that you can take to help quit alcohol and get sober and stay sober for good. And the first pivot is called honest acceptance. You cannot find a solution for a problem if you're not willing to admit there is a problem. You don't have to name your problem. You don't have to label it. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. You can simply call it a negative relationship with alcohol. But the beauty of honest acceptance is that once you accept that maybe you have a problem, you can then begin to tap into that desire to change, the desire to do something about it, the desire to quit alcohol for good. There's no shame or guilt around any of this, and the stigma in your mind by just admitting to you and maybe even someone who's a trusted confidant that maybe you have struggles with alcohol and that you want to quit. And it's a really powerful thing when you find a sober ally, a friend, a family member, maybe even a complete stranger who shared their sober story that resonated with you, and you just say, hey, I have a problem with alcohol. I can't stop once I start. It's taking control. I'm an alcoholic. I have alcohol use disorder. Whatever it is, if you can just say that out loud, not only to yourself, but also a complete stranger or a confidant or someone that you trust, that is a powerful way to start breaking the stigma in your own mind. And it's a powerful first pivot that you've got to take in your sober journey. So hit that like button if you are ready to end the stigma, the shame, and the guilt, and just admit once and for all that you have a problem with alcohol. It's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with you. The second pivot is evaluate and game plan. All right, so we've named the problem. We have a negative relationship with alcohol. Now we can start looking for solutions. And the first thing is, how are you going to quit? If you're not physically dependent on alcohol, you can go cold turkey. I know the idea is scary to just pick up and just stop drinking right here, right now, today. But the reality is, if you keep putting it off for tomorrow, you will never quit. And if you are not physically dependent on alcohol and you can stop drinking safely, there is no reason not to start today. But how are you going to quit if you are physically dependent? You might have to consider a detox center, a rehab center. You probably need to consult a doctor to have some support so that you can safely do it. So there is a different process for everyone within this pivot. You have to do what's best for you and your situation so that you can safely leave alcohol behind. And if you're one of the fortunate ones that are not physically dependent and you are going to go the cold turkey route, how are you going to do that? Do you have a support community? Is your family your support community? Do you have sober friends? Do you have allies? Do you have people that understand what you're going to do by quitting alcohol and what kind of support that you will need so that they are there for you when they can be? And so this is all really, really important stuff to build, honestly, a game plan for you so that you have a start date, regardless if it's today or tomorrow or a week from now. You know where you're going to go. You know that all of your responsibilities are going to be taken care of while you are maybe in detox or rehab. If you need to go to meetings or support groups and you need coverage for maybe your job or for your kids or for your spouse, you can plan all this stuff ahead. And it's a really important aspect of quitting alcohol because life continues even while we quit. But for your sobriety, there has to be time for you, and there has to be time for support, and there has to be time for healing so that you can start building a foundation to quit alcohol for good and to truly step into sobriety. And all of this leads into the third pivot, which is ask for help. There is no shame or guilt in asking for help. You do not have to get sober and stay sober and figure out how to handle the new life without alcohol all by yourself. There are so many resources out there. There's so many recovery support groups out there. Obviously, there's AA. There are plenty of places to go where you can just let people know what you're doing, that you have a problem with alcohol, that you know what the next steps are, but that you just need someone to be there for you. There are plenty of options, my friend. But don't let your pride and your ego get in the way of you asking for help, because you deserve help. You deserve support. You deserve having allies by your side who probably honestly are going through the exact same thing. So while you're receiving support, you can also give support. It's a beautiful pivot because everyone benefits. But don't let your pride and your ego get in the way of asking for help, because you don't have to do this journey on your own. The fourth pivot is, well, the most important pivot if you really want to live a sober life, if you want to be sober, if you want to quit alcohol for good. You have to literally quit at some point. You can't just think about it. You can't just talk about it. You can't evaluate and game plan for the next year. You just have to do it. But this is where all of the honest acceptance, the accountability, the evaluation, the game plan, and the allies, this is where it all comes together so that you can confidently and safely step into day one without alcohol. And I know a big thing that people ask about in the community, even on other social platforms, is how to deal with the cravings. And I know the idea of facing cravings is really, really scary, and it kind of stonewall us into even taking that first step in that first day without alcohol. But ultimately, my friends, cravings are just feelings. They do pass. I know in the past when you were drinking, maybe you didn't feel like you had any control. I sure know that I didn't. But now in sobriety, you do have control. And yeah, those cravings represent maybe triggers, stressors, emotions, and feelings that drove your drinking in the past, but now they're just feelings. And they do go away if you just give yourself the time and the space within that moment. You know, if you're feeling really thirsty and you really don't think that you can get through it without having a drink, I want you to think about that cocktail or that beer being gasoline. I mean, that's gross, right? None of us would actually drink gasoline. So visualize that cocktail or that drink being gasoline, and let that deter you from having a drink. But if that's a little too aggressive and you don't like the visualization approach, of course there's always meetings to go to. There are online support groups that you can log into to have other people to talk with in those moments where cravings feel like they're a little out of control. But you can't always be in meetings. You can't always be around people. So a really important thing to do is to find a way to stay busy in the early sobriety stages. Find new hobbies, take up knitting, play video games, have sex if you're in a safe, consensual relationship where sex feels great, because it is a great way to release that pent-up frustration. Do some journaling, do some drawing. A really great thing to do is you gotta get into your body, go for a walk, take a cold shower, go to the gym, work out, do yoga, something that will take your mind off the feelings. And the beautiful thing is, every time you get through a day sober and you dealt with those cravings and those stressors and those feelings and you're still sober, your resilience and your strength skyrockets every single day as you progress. It's amazing, so you can do this. And I kind of just touched on the next pivot, but you have to find a way to deal with and limit stressors and triggers. Just because we choose to stop drinking alcohol doesn't mean that the stressors and the triggers and the feelings and the emotions and the pain of the past just go away and leave us alone. And even though we can't run from those things forever, in the meantime, we can find ways to limit them. We can set boundaries for ourselves and for others just to make our early sobriety days a little bit more bearable and a little bit easier. But the first part of this is that awareness is really, really important. What are your triggers? What are the stressors? What sets you off and makes you want to drink? Is there a fear involved? Is there grief involved? Is there anger, frustration, anxiety, stress? What is it? If you can get to know those stressors and those triggers, you become aware of them and you know how to maybe either prevent them or how to deal with them when they come upon you. And then in terms of setting boundaries that you can actually make, you might have to change your social settings for a while. You probably don't want to go to a bar or be around a lot of people that are drinking alcohol. And just because you set those boundaries in your early sobriety, maybe in the first year, it doesn't mean that your life is going to be like that for the rest of your life. Don't future trip so much about what life will be like without having a social life, because you can have a social life. And honestly, part of this whole thing is that you have to kind of redefine what being social is for you. Because I'm sure, like myself, for a long time, you associated alcohol with being social. Well, now you have to redefine that in what is being social. It's just being around people that we like, hanging out with people that are like-minded. It really has nothing to do with alcohol or getting drunk. And there's so many ways to have fun and to be sober. So you just have to kind of change that perspective and that idea in your mind. But until you can do that, until that's concrete, limit the time at bars, limit the time around people with alcohol. You might even have to kind of put some boundaries with people that enabled your drinking in the past. You might have to tell some friends that you can't hang out for a while. And if they're really good friends, they're going to totally understand. Or they're probably going to even try to not drink around you. Unfortunately, there might be some friendships and acquaintances that might just have to go away for good. Whether they understand and respect what you're trying to do, or whether you choose to move on from them, Unfortunately, sometimes that happens. And sometimes even relationships, sometimes unfortunately, those end as well. It's not ideal, and ultimately we don't want that to happen, but sometimes it does. And then a really, really hard one in this pivot is jobs. We all work really hard. I don't know what you guys do for work. We can't just pick up and walk away from our job because many of us have families. We have bills to pay. We can't just find another job that easily. So in the meantime, while you're getting sober, you have to find a way to alleviate and just lower the stress levels at work somehow, so that you're not sitting there thinking, hey, it's 4 o'clock somewhere. Or like in the olden days where you thought, I can't wait to get home and out of my job so I can go take the edge off and wind down a little bit. In this pivot, it's just really important to learn how to limit your stressors, try to set some boundaries for the triggers, because that will just make the process much easier for you. And I'm really curious to know what you've done or what you plan to do when it comes to quitting alcohol and dealing with cravings and limiting the stressors and the triggers. So in the comments, let me know what you've done in the past, because anything that we can offer to everyone else is super, super helpful. And all of this now leads to the 6th pivot, which is change. Nothing changes if nothing changes, my friend. If we do not find a way to change how we deal with life, how we respond to our stressors, how we respond to our triggers, we will go back to alcohol eventually. If we don't go back to alcohol, we'll probably still find that we're miserable, we're discontent, we're unhappy, we're frustrated, we're angry, because we are not making the mental, emotional, and spiritual choices to change in the ways that really let us live a sober lifestyle and truly embrace sobriety. But a big part of quitting alcohol for good is that we have to change everything. We have to change our behaviors and our habits. We have to change how we cope with life. We might even have to change certain aspects of our life. And I touched on this in limiting stressors and triggers already, but I'm talking about a permanent change, not just a short-term change to help you get through the early stages of sobriety, but a permanent change that really lets you embrace the sober lifestyle, so that you don't ever go back to alcohol, so that ultimately you don't even think about alcohol or want it or need it or even have that thirst come upon you. That's the ultimate goal. And that's why real change has to occur. And those changes take place in our mind, in our heart, in our spirit, so that our mental health, our spiritual health, our physical health can progress and can become the type of health that we've always wanted to have, that alcohol was keeping us from. So just don't forget that mantra, that nothing changes if nothing changes. And this is all possible with the 7th pivot, which is talk it out. You have to eventually express your feelings, your thoughts, and your emotions, and even talk about your alcohol use and why you used alcohol the way that you did, and maybe where your alcoholism started, or when it started, or where you started picking up the habitual use of alcohol to cope with emotions and life in general. And a safest place to do this is with a therapist or a counselor, someone that can guide you through maybe your childhood, through traumatic events, through anything and everything that led you to finding alcohol and realizing that it was a solution until we realized it was no longer a solution. Obviously, there's places like AA where you can go and sit and listen to other people's stories, and you can even share your own story so that you can begin to be heard and validated about your own feelings around alcohol and struggles with it. But it's not the only option. There's plenty of recovery and support communities out there, both in person, virtual, on social media, where you can find people that are like-minded who will completely understand where you're at and what you're feeling. But at some point, you have to talk about all of it, because you can't heal and you can't fight the cravings and the thirst if you're not willing to talk about the pain of the past and the things that led you to using alcohol in a negative manner in the first place. All right, now this leads us directly into the 8th pivot, which I call sit with the feelings. And we've already set ourselves up for this really, really good with that 7th pivot. You know, we've talked it out. We've got a therapist or a counselor or sober allies or friends that understand our journey, that have been able to help us flesh out maybe the emotions and feelings behind it all. Oftentimes it's fear, it's resentment, it's grief, it's trauma, it's some pain from the past that usually kind of sets us off. Now we have to sit with it. We can't run from it anymore. You know, during one of the pivots we talked about having to deal with the cravings, and that was a temporary solution, getting into the body and whatnot. But eventually there is this point where now we have to face it all. And that's hard, but it can be safe with a therapist or a counselor, or you can even do it on your own, because you just have to sit with it. And I heard this amazing quote once, that feelings are real, but they are not reality. And I'm going to say that again. Feelings are real, but they are not reality. And if you want to quit alcohol for good, if you truly want to stay sober for the rest of your life, you've got to deal with these feelings every single day. Because like I already said, life doesn't stop just because we're getting sober. Stressors, triggers, emotions, feelings, the past pain, past trauma, it doesn't go away just because we choose to throw away our coping mechanism. And that's okay. Being human is dealing with our feelings and emotions. And once you get to know them, once you experience them, once you get through them on a number of times and you stay sober, they become less and less scary. And one of the best ways to do this, in my opinion, is that you have to do it in complete solitude. Because no matter how many meetings you go to, how many support communities you're part of, whether it's on social media, whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, whether you have a therapist or a counselor, family or friends or anyone to talk to, you can't be around or in those places at all time. You will have to be alone at some point. And it's a really powerful ability to be able to be alone, triggered up, and dealing with those feelings and staying sober. Like your strength and resilience will skyrocket to the moon, like they say in the crypto world. And maybe you won't do a lot of this solitude, sitting with your feelings in the first few months, maybe not even the first year of sobriety, but eventually you can get there. You do have the strength and the courage to face those feelings. Once you get to this point of your sober journey where you can sit with your feelings, especially when you're by yourself in solitude, a really powerful tool I think that's really effective is to journal. I like to call it a brain dump. At the end of every day, or even in the midst of being triggered up, you sit there with a pad of paper and a pen and you just write everything that's going on in your head. You just write it down. You get messy. You don't worry about grammar. You don't worry about spelling. You don't even worry if your penmanship looks nice or not. Just stream of consciousness. Just let it all flow. Get it all out and on that paper. And then one thing that I really like to do after I do that is I take the piece of paper, I tear it up, and I throw it away. And while I do that, I simply say this mantra: I am not my feelings, I am not my emotions, I am not my past. They have no control over me. I'm going to reiterate that for you, my friend. You are not your feelings, you are not your emotions, you are not your past. They do not control you. And you can sit with all of it, and you can stay sober. And when you can do all of that by yourself with no one watching, that is true sobriety, and that is true strength. And I know that you have that in you. And the ninth pivot is about changing our perspective around the relapse. Don't be afraid of relapsing. Obviously, we don't want to relapse. The goal is to not go back to alcohol and have to deal with a relapse and starting over. But don't be afraid of it. The more that we fear it, the more that we stress about it or obsess about a relapse, the more likely it is that we are going to make it happen. It's like we are self-sabotaging by thinking about it all the time, by thinking that it's going to happen. And if you relapse, it's okay. The amount of time that you were sober is not a waste of time. You are not starting over. Forget about this idea of starting over at day one or I'm starting all over again. You are not. You are just adding to your sober journey. A relapse is just a lapse in judgment. You are only human. It happens. But that relapse does not have to define the rest of your life. It does not have to define your relationship with alcohol. It does not mean that you are stuck in it and that you're never going to get out of it. So just try to shift your perspective around the concept of the relapse. Obviously, do whatever you can in your power to make sure it doesn't happen. But if it does, it's not the end of the world. You get up, you dust yourself off, you learn from that, you grow from it, and you get back on your sober journey. And you get to prove others wrong who maybe doubted you. You get to prove yourself wrong if you doubted yourself. And by getting back on the sober horse after a relapse, you just will begin to realize and reaffirm and validate for yourself just how strong, resilient, and courageous you are. I relapsed 3 times, and my last one was really scary, but I survived it, and that was the one that made me go, okay, I'm quitting for good, and here's why. So sometimes a relapse can be really, really powerful because it will help you completely step into quitting alcohol for good and know once and for all that the sober life is the best choice for you. And now the 10th pivot. It's not even really a pivot, it's just that you keep pivoting. It's pretty much that the work never stops. And that's not meant to be a daunting, scary statement that you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to do this work for the rest of my life. It's not really about that. It's just about the fact that just like life doesn't stop when we get sober, neither does the work within sobriety. And the more that we use the pivots that you find in this sobriety guide or whatever sober guide or sober resource that speaks to you, if you continue to do the work that works for you, the recovery journey that is best for you, and you just keep doing it, it will change other aspects of your life. In terms of this sobriety guide, I think that these pivots can really help in so many other ways because addiction manifests in so many different ways. There's so many things that we could consider a problem that we could then just walk our way through these pivots and this guide to overcome that as well. But lean on this guide, lean on these pivots, go back to the ones that speak to you the most. You don't even have to do them 1 through 10, but just keep pivoting, keep shifting, keep making changes, my friend. And eventually, all of the work, all of this pivoting and shifting and change that I'm talking about, it will become second nature, and you honestly won't even have to think about it. Just like I hope and I believe that eventually you won't even have to think about alcohol ever again, and the thirst will never take you over ever again. And now, as promised, because you watched this entire video, which I really, really appreciate, I have a free digital download for you. In the description below, scroll all the way down to the very, very, very bottom of the description. Very, very bottom, you'll find a Google link drive that will give you access to this sobriety guide in PDF version. It's yours to keep, it's yours to print out, it's yours to do with whatever you want. I hope that you share this video so that others find this video and the PDF and the sobriety guide within it. And of course, I really, really appreciate it if you might consider subscribing to my channel so that I can continue to be part of your sober journey. Now, because sobriety literally can mean life or death, if you need 10 reasons to stay sober, check out this video right here, because I give 10 of my top reasons I stayed sober, and I think a lot of them will resonate with you. Thanks for your time. Check out that video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.